Hey guys, today I'm going to give you 5 tips for producing great records. Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving you 5 tips to producing great records. Before we get started, don't forget to like the video if, of course, you like the video. Subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this, and make sure that you hit the bell icon so that you're notified every single time I upload a new video just like this one. Today we're talking about 5 tips to help you produce great records. Now, this is not the video where I'm going to tell you what microphone you should be using, what DAW you should be using, which interface, compressor, mic pre. It's not that. What I'm going to talk about today are actually the important things of what it takes when you are trying to produce a great project. Because honestly, the gear doesn't really matter in the end. When something's mixed or mastered, it doesn't matter if you used an onboard mic pre or an outboard mic pre. I'm here to tell you, it just doesn't. But how you, the producer, thinks about the project and approaches the project, deals with the musicians, deals with the artists, how you handle that 100% determines the greatness of the product that you're gonna get on the other end. So let's get started. Tip number 1, serve the music. Now, what I mean by that is we as producers tend to have a little bit of an ego. Look, I'll be the first one to tell you, I have a huge ego. But I will also tell you that I feel like I improved my productions and I went further in my career the more I pulled myself out of the process and I started learning to serve the music. As producers, we all like to think that we have a particular stamp or a particular talent that we put on these projects so that they're ours and we notice it and we know that it's ours and we take ownership of it because we want the credit. When somebody says, oh man, that record sounded so good, we want to be able to beat our chest a little bit and go, yep, I produced that record. And a lot of times in this business, credit means more than the money you're getting paid to produce it, because the more credits you have, the bigger your name gets, and the more people you get to work with, the better quality of artists that you get to work with, and the bigger projects and the bigger artists that you get to work on. But I'm telling you that if you will remove yourself from the project and really get down to focusing on serving the music, I can promise you all of the other will take care of itself. In order to serve the music, a great producer knows how to create a framework, okay? I tell a lot of new producers that it's a lot like the highway, okay? You've got a yellow line on this side and a yellow line on that side. You have to be flexible enough to allow whatever happens in between those yellow lines to happen. That is creating a framework that serves the music. A couple other ways you can serve the music are very simple, but oftentimes are not actually practiced. When you're having a session and you've got 4 or 5 players showing up, get to the studio an hour early. I often get there an hour and a half early unless I know that there is a session before mine with completely different players and different artists and things like that. I still get there an hour early, and even if I have to wait outside, I'll wait outside until I get the all clear that it's okay to come in, because I'm creating a framework for that session. I'm creating a framework for the music. And that always starts with you as the producer. Another way to serve the music really well is to prepare. I can't tell you how many times and how many producers that I've known over the years that they prepare 30 minutes before the studio. They haven't really put in the time to get to know the music. And how can you serve the music if you don't know the music? Start creating that framework days, weeks ahead. Before I go into a session, I know these songs inside and out. Even though they're not my songs, I'm not the artist, I know them inside and out. And I've already begun days, weeks, sometimes months out, creating that framework for those songs so that when I show up to the studio, I'm prepared to do my job. So tip number 1, serve the music. Take as much of yourself out of the process. It's all about the vision and the framework that you're creating for that music. So serve the music first and foremost. Tip number 2, be the vibe and set the tone. Whatever you've got going on in your personal life, you may be fighting with the girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, parent, you may have had a bad day, you've got to leave that outside the studio. You cannot take your personal life into the studio and let it influence what you're about to do, because you're working for someone else. you're working for a record label or a publishing company or an artist, or who knows who you might be working for, a film. You cannot bring your personal life into that studio and let it influence the greatness that could possibly happen in the room. And when I say be the vibe, that means when you leave all of that stuff at the door, walk in there with an open mind and an open heart and a great attitude. You and your attitude will set the tone for the entire session. So if you're aggravated about something or you're upset about something, the people that you encounter, the players, the guitar players, the keyboard players, the drummers, the percussionists, anybody that you run into, that's going to automatically infect them, not affect them, infect them. And that is going to play out through the entirety of your session. So be the vibe. Walk in the room. Whatever vibe you want in that session is the vibe that you should be putting out. You should be friendly. You should be jovial. You should be helping the musicians load their stuff in. And listen, I do that. And I don't have to do that, but I do that because it helps set the tone and it helps set the vibe that, hey, we're all in this thing together. I'm no more important than you are. You're no more important than I am. And how can we work together to make this thing happen efficiently, and how to get the best sounds that we can get, and how to get, most importantly, the best performance out of everybody in the room, because that is so important. You have to be at your best, and you want all the musicians and the engineers, you want them at their best as well. It's no secret that people work better when they're happy. One of the things I often do is I'll call ahead of time to whoever's leading the session, and I'll say, hey, do you want me to grab Starbucks for everybody? Or I'll stop by and pick up 2 or 3 dozen donuts, or I'll order in some pizza just to set the tone. Because I don't know if those guys had time to eat between sessions, or maybe one of them is having a bad day and showing up and there being some donuts there or some pizza there or a 12-pack of beer or whatever it might be, might just get them out of their framework and their mindset, so that then when they walk through that door, they might have brought something from early in the day with them. It's my job as the producer to set the vibe, set the tone, so that hopefully for them, I can change that. Why? So that I get the best out of them, so that it all benefits me. So tip number 2, be the vibe, set the tone. Tip number 3 is really hard for some people, okay? But I want you to listen, and this is very important. The magic is in the mistakes. Music was never intended to be perfect. A lot of times I even hate when it comes to your DAWs, whether it's, Logic or Pro Tools or any other DAW, with being able to lock things to a grid and have a grid mode. Music is fluid and it's imperfect at its finest form. The beauty and the magic is in those mistakes. Allow those things to happen. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a studio and we've been going over, we get to the solo section and lead guitar player is playing, and we all kind of have something in our head. We kind of know what we're going for, and we're allowing him to expand on his talent and really be a producer in the moment as well, playing the instrument. And he plays something completely wrong, and everybody else in the studio just looks at each other and goes, wow. That is not what we were shooting for, but that's amazing. None of us were thinking about that, and he wasn't even thinking about it. It was a mistake. You have no idea how many times mistakes have made it onto records. If you go back and you listen to old Bruce Springsteen records or Elton John records or The Who, or name any band that you can think of, you can hear mistakes on those records. And it's the mistakes where maybe the drummer got a little bit out of time, or that drum fill was a little out of place, or the guitar player hit a wrong note. Those are what make those records great. Music was never intended to be perfect. It was never intended to be locked to a grid to where that it's so perfect that there's no feel. Music should be about feel. It should make you feel something. It should make you want to do something, but you only want to do something when you feel something. You only get that feeling when there are slight imperfections. So the magic is in the mistakes. Don't always think that you've got to go back and, I've got to correct that. That's not right. Or that snare hit is just an eighth note out of place. Think about it sometimes and just leave it the way that it is. Let the magic happen. Again, it goes back to creating a framework for the music and serving the music. Don't lock everything to a grid, okay? Let it breathe. Let it live. Let it be a living, breathing thing, because when it is, that's when the feeling comes out. And you want to know great songs? Truly great songs are songs that people can connect with. And I promise you that people do not and will not connect with something that is locked to a grid and perfect every single time. Do not take the feeling out of your songs. The magic is in the mistakes. Tip number 4, learn the lingo, okay? There is a specific language that goes on in a session in a recording studio. So many times I remember like going for coffee or going out to eat after a session that I'm producing a record for an artist, and one of the first things they always say as things start to kind of quiet down is, I didn't understand half of what you guys were talking about. That is so important to learn the language. Do you know the Nashville number system? Do you know what the different terms are when it comes to mic pre's and compressors? Do you know the terminology of the DAWs? It's so important to know how to communicate with players and with engineers in the studio. If you have successfully built this framework, you want to make sure that things stay inside that framework for your project. The only way you can do that is to speak the language and understand the language. Do you know what it means when, okay, we need to bring that down a couple steps, or we need to back the BPM down. It's, we're at 114, but it feels a little rushed. All right, let's back it down to 113. Do you really understand the difference between a 114 BPM and a 113? Most people think that you're not going to be able to tell any difference, but a lot of times, one tick down like that can set a pocket and can set a groove. And I'll tell you a story coming up about another tip that it was plain as day to me, and I was trying to interject too much of myself, but I was wrong, and I'll tell you about that coming up. But you have to know the lingo. You have to know what everybody's talking about. I know with a lot of the guys that I use on the projects that I produce, we have a code. It's almost a secret language. It's not always a definite thing. Like one of the things with Dave Dorn, I have this thing that I like, and we call it the fake steel. It's not a steel guitar at all, but it kind of faintly sounds like one. So if I'm wanting that on a record, I'll look at Dave and say, hey, give me that fake steel thing. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. He knows exactly how I want it played, and he'll dial that sound right up, and we'll get to work. You have to develop a language. You have to develop a bond and a connection with the people that you're working with on a regular basis to develop that language so that it serves the music the best. And you can effectively communicate in the middle of a session to keep things moving. You only have so much time in the studio. Here in Nashville, one session is 3 hours long. We try our best to get 5 songs, up to 5 songs. Sometimes if they're very complex, we'll do 2 songs, 3 songs, but a lot of times you really want to try to get 5. Being able to produce 5 fully produced songs in 3 hours is very difficult to do. But when you have a connection, when you're serving the music, when you have a language with the people that you've put in the room, and it's almost a shorthand, it's a lot easier to do because everybody communicates effectively and quickly, okay? So it's important to learn the language, and if you don't already have that language, start creating that language with the people that you work with regularly. Tip number 5, always assume everybody in the room knows more than you do. Now, I know this one's hard. Again, it goes back to removing yourself from the process, right? And serving the music instead of serving yourself and your ego. Always assume that everybody in the room knows more than you do, because I'm going to be real honest with you, they probably do. Now, I may have been producing records for 25 years, and in that time, I've done many, I don't even want to try to think about a number of sessions that I've done producing the records that I've produced. But I can promise you that every musician on that session has probably done more sessions than I have. It doesn't mean necessarily that they've achieved the success in producing records like I have, but they have actually done the process probably 4 times to 10 times more than I have, because they're playing 3 sessions a day, 5, 6, sometimes 7 times a day, okay? It is so important to understand this. The reason that I use the players that I use when I'm producing a record is because every single one of those guys is an accomplished producer on their own. Whether it's the keyboard player or the drummer or the acoustic guitar player, the electric guitar player, the bass player, it doesn't matter. They are all capable of producing phenomenal projects on their own. So when I step into a studio with these other 5 or 6 guys, it's like having 6 or 7 producers on your project, not just one. And you have to be open to their ideas. Allow them, again, if you've created that framework, allow them to be creative. Allow them to do to their best what you're paying them to do. Allow them to bring their knowledge of the thousands and thousands and thousands of sessions that they've been on and the thousands of records that they've played on. Allow them to bring that experience and influence into the room to be present on the project. I can promise you that your project will only be better. There are a lot of big producers that are famous for not doing this, Mutt Lange being one. He would tell guitar players exactly how he wanted them to play it, and there was no flexibility for allowing an artist to be an artist. He wanted it his way, and that was the only way. There are a lot of producers out there like that, but there are far more better producers out there that allow the people in the room. There's a reason why you've called and you wanted that drummer on your session. There's a reason you've called that keyboard or synth player and you want them there. Allow them to do what it is that you called them for. Allow them to be creative. When you do, they will go above and beyond, and it makes your records better. It all goes back to tip number 1, and that is serving the music. When you've got all of these players in a room serving the music, the only thing that can happen is for your song, your EP, your album, your production is going to be better for the artist that you're working for. I told you I'd tell you a quick story, and this plays perfect into this. This was a session, it wasn't even maybe a month ago. We were in the studio, and it was the first time we were running through a song for the artist, and we got to the chorus, and about halfway through the chorus, I just felt like it was dragging a little bit. And so I stopped the tracking, and I said, guys, let's bump this up a little bit. It feels like it's dragging to me. And the drummer that was on the session, who I've used hundreds and hundreds of times, a good friend, he goes, man, I don't know, I kind of want to do this pocket thing in the chorus. And I'm like, no, it's dragging to me. Let's bump it up. And I think we were at 112. And so we bumped it up to 115. And we started running through the song again. Everything felt fine in the verse. We got to the chorus and it felt a little bit rushed. And so I stopped everybody and I'm like, okay, that felt a little too rushed. So let's back it down one. So we go to 114. We did it again and we couldn't find a groove, couldn't find the pocket. I'm like, all right, let's back it down to 113. Guess where we ended up cutting that song at? 112. Exactly where we started and exactly where the drummer said that we needed to be. What I didn't know at the time was that he was planning on doing some extra programming things to add 8th notes and 16th notes to keep the beat moving, to keep it driving so that it didn't feel like it was lagging in the chorus. Always assume that everybody in the room knows more than you do. In that situation, I was wrong. I had no idea what his plan for the chorus was and what his pattern was going to be and what kind of things he was going to overdub in programming that was going to take that feeling of slowing down and being laggy. He was going to completely eliminate that with a part that he already had in his head. But I was not allowing him to do what I hired him to do. Always assume that everybody else in the room knows more than you do, because they probably do. All right, guys, there you go. 5 tips to producing better records. Let's go back through them. Number 1, serve the music. Number 2, be the vibe and set the tone. Number 3, the magic is in the mistakes. Number 4, learn the lingo. Number 5, always assume that everybody in the room knows more than you do. Guys, as we wrap this video up, I want to make sure that you understood what we talked about today. Making great records is not about the mic pre that you use. It is not about the microphone that you use. It's not about anything or any external piece of gear or any external board or console. That's not what makes great records. What makes great records is serving the music and creating a framework and bringing and putting the right people in the room with the right vibe. That's what really matters. Allowing creative people to be creative within the framework that you create. I promise you, if you take these steps and you start thinking about them, even if you're a solo producer and you're producing everything in your studio, always approach every project, everything you're producing, just like this. And I put tip number 1 at the top for a very important reason, because we've got to remove ourselves from the process and serve the music instead of serving ourselves and serving our ego and serving our desires. The music deserves better than that. So I hope you use these 5 tips to producing great records in your career, and be sure and let me know in the comments section what you think, how your process works, how you can better implement these 5 tips to produce better records in your studio or anywhere else in great studios around the world. Guys, if you like the video, be sure hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you like the video and you want more content just like this. But when you do, make sure you hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time I upload a new video. Until the next one, guys, keep being creative, keep pressing the boundaries, and there's nothing wrong with being independent. See you in the next video.